This year, I was fortunate enough to draw an antelope tag for Wyoming, so we're going to head for Wyoming. We had a few things to do, so we're kind of late, and season has already begun, but we're going to head out and hope for the best. On our way, we have to go by our daughter Annette's place at La Pine and help them lay a little tile. This'll put us another couple days late, but since we're not there for the first day, that's fine. We head down our little road in front of our house with the trees lining the road and a little bit of sunshine starting to shine, so that's good. We head out on the main road and past all the vineyards of the Willamette Valley, and also we'll go past a lot of filbert trees. The rather new industry of growing grapes and making wine in the Willamette Valley is really taken off, and there are vineyards as far as the eye can see. There are clusters of grapes hanging on them. It looks as though they're just ready to start their fall harvest. Another new crop that has started to grace the Willamette Valley is the acres and acres and acres of filbert or hazelnut trees. There have always been some, but never the amount that are growing now. We push on over the Santiam Pass, and our brand new pickup is a pleasure to drive as we move out of a rest area on the Santiam Pass. Then we enter the pass. We see a few deciduous trees and lots of fir and hemlock as we move up the west slope of the Cascades. When we get up on top where we see Mount Washington and the summit, then we'll start down the other side into the pine forest. The next place we see is Sisters, Oregon. It's become quite a tourist place, and it takes a little while to get through there because those darn tourists are crossing the road all the time. But we just go slow and easy through Sisters. It's more like a circus now. They must have had some real good promotions here because this was at one time a sleepy, almost dead little rundown town. Then somebody got the idea to make it up into a tourist place, and wow, did it take off. All sorts of shops where you can go and get rid of your hard-earned money, and plenty of it in Sisters. The shops stretch through the whole town, and then when we get out of town, it's free sailing again till we get in Bend. Through Bend and then down along the lodgepole forest of Central Oregon, and we'll soon be at Annette's place in the lodgepoles of La Pine. We pull in her driveway and see that she's already been here but is out on some sort of an expedition. So we'll just go on in and make ourselves at home and get ready to start working. We brought our cargo trailer along, and we brought a tile saw and what will. Our tile job didn't take long, and so as soon as we're done, we continue on our journey
eastward to
First
Wyoming.
night, we look out toward Coyote Lake, and it looks pretty rainy there. That's where Annette's 160 acres are located. We pull in to White Horse or Willow Creek Hot Springs and find that it rained there too. But we're going to set our tent up and get everything ready for the night, and then a nice dip in the hot springs would be in order. Seldom it rains here, but this time the rain is quite welcome because it's been a really bad drought, and besides, we're in hot water. What would a little extra rain hurt? Marge takes some old newspapers and covers our clothes over so they will be nice and dry when we get out of the hot springs. But that's pretty nice having that rain come right down into the hot water while you're in there. I'm in the hot springs and enjoying every minute of it. I guess I look kind of like a drowned rat, and Marge is telling me to comb my hair back a little bit. We're in the desert, and in the desert you don't have rain, but it looks to me like the drops are getting bigger as they come crashing in to the steaming hot water of Willow Creek Hot Springs. Soon the rain lets up a little bit, and we can still use the hot springs. It didn't cool it off one little bit. We spent one real soggy wet night at Willow Creek, and then we move on. Our tent and everything in it got soaking wet that night, but we'll dry it out as we enter into Idaho. And straight past Craters of the Moon. We'd planned to use the hot springs at Craters of the Moon and spend the night here. That's one of our favorite places to spend the night, in the lava beds of Craters of the Moon National Park. But Marge said everything is so wet that we can't spend the night, so we'll just head right on for the cabin. We'll just watch the lava flows of Craters of the Moon from the window of the car as we move on. And then comes Arco, Idaho. This is a very interesting little town. The kids from the high school have painted the year that they graduate up on the mountain behind on the cliffs, and there's some back in the 1920s and even earlier than that. It's a very interesting little town, and it was the first town in America that was lit up by nuclear generated power. The environmentalists have made them, in very recent years, have made them stop painting on the cliff walls. They were afraid somebody'd fall and get hurt, and also it was killing some sort of an algae or lichen on the rock. But anyway, it's there for all to see that go by. Next, we go through eastern Idaho and then to Palisades Reservoir. And then we see the sign, "Welcome to Wyoming." We push on, and in just a little bit, we arrive at the cabin. Wally and Gretis join us. Wally's going with me on an antelope hunt. So we go to bed that night. The next morning, we're up early and ready to go out and get our antelope. Wally's fixing me up with a little helmet camera right on my forehead for the hunt. We get in the pickup all of us, and head out. Right in our driveway, as we start to move out, we see some nice fat sage chickens. We seem to see quite a few of them this year, and they're walking along, eating a little gravel for their gizzard. We forgot to bring our shotgun, and season is going to open within a day or two, but that's all right. They're almost too special an animal to hunt. Not only did we see this bunch of sage grouse, we saw them at numerous different places. This is our private little bunch for our front yard, so if we had a shotgun, we wouldn't be hunting them anyway. And then antelope. We saw antelope every place we looked. Some old does and fawns and a little buck. Then it seems like the buck. I couldn't draw a buck antelope tag this year, no matter what I tried, so I put in for a half-price doe tag, and I did happen to draw one this year, even though they're getting hard to get. So we hunted for 2 days before we finally. Our neighbor at the cabin invited us over to the replica of an Indian spirit hut to have a potluck dinner. I brought an antelope roast, and they dug some potatoes and carrots. And so this will all be cooked in a Dutch oven, the old-fashioned way, over an open fire. There's a hole right in the top of the spirit hut, more like a teepee, and then the smoke goes out, and it doesn't smoke up the place at all. What a nice setup. So there's plenty of seats for everyone to sit down and enjoy a really great antelope feed. Another couple showed up for the feed. They're the neighbor on the other side. So we'll all have sort of a little community get together and huddle around a fire on one of those sort of chilly Wyoming evenings. You build a fire, but a small one. It's like you build a small fire and stand close instead of a big fire and stand away back. Jeff is getting last-minute preparations while the rest of them are telling the antelope hunt story. The antelope roast is done, and Jeff brings the big Dutch oven over. It's so heavy you can hardly carry it, and he asked me to cut the meat up. So I'll get right after it, and we'll cut up enough for everyone to have all they want of antelope roast. The potatoes, onions, and carrots are in the bottom of the Dutch oven, so they'll be taken out and served too. Since I was careful not to shoot an old doe with a fawn sucking her, I got an old dry doe, so that'll be really super good meat, and she was nice and fat since she hadn't had to watch after a fawn. The meat is by now almost completely cut up, and so all we have to do is get situated around the table and enjoy our feast. Sandra and Jeff's children are playing, waiting for everyone to get sat down, and Wally and Greta look on as the meal is about to be served.
There, you sit beside her and I'll go sit beside Sam.
Thanks for joining, letting us all join together here for dinner, and thanks for the antelope.
Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah. I could just, you guys could just help yourself, and I could walk it, pass it around.
Okay, that sounds good.
If that works.
Yeah.
The keeper of the stars has already put that Wyoming sunshine to bed right behind the Wyoming range when we get done. The next morning, we look out where we'd cleaned up and skinned the antelope, and we'd cut a few scraps off. And so, of course, we have visitors coming. The magpies are all over the place. There's even one magpie that looks as though he doesn't do a very good job
preening his
a
feathers.
patch of dirt right on his breast. So we called him Scruffy. And Scruffy was a very important magpie. He was one of the main ones to show up here. They'd try to grab a piece and fly with it if it wasn't too big. And if it were too big, they'd just peck and peck on it and get a swallow wherever they could. There goes Scruffy. He's going to be right in the thick of the action. There's a slight bit of unrest in the magpie community. Somebody had the nerve to argue a little bit with Scruffy, so Scruffy will take off and come in from another direction to get his fair share and then some. Some of them land on the little post right outside the porch and wait for their chance. I take some pictures through our screen on one of the windows as Greta watches on at the magpie, and there's Scruffy again. He's got to be right where there's something to eat, and he's the head magpie. We'll leave the magpies to their own eating and go for a little drive up in the Wind River Mountains. We're going up and take a look at Fremont Lake. Under the one tree, we saw a little plaque and a box sitting on a rock. We later discovered it was someone's ashes sitting right in a box up on Fremont Lake. We came across a mule up by Elkhart Park, and he apparently had slipped away from some archery hunters and was off seeking his fortune on his own. We stopped and looked over the peaks of the Wind River mountain range. There's several of these peaks that are over 13,000 feet high. This is high Wyoming country with some lodgepole pine. Up here's where the lodgepole came from that we built our cabin of. This high country is good country to take pictures. Everyone took a lot of pictures up here. Marge and Wally are just making sure they've got plenty up overlooking the deep blue color of Fremont Lake. It's our second deepest lake in the United States, and so it's deep, and it's a real deep color blue due to its depth. Next, we took a drive up toward Green River Lakes, and here were two small buck deer grazing right alongside the road as we went by. They better be careful. I think archery season is open, and how are they to know we didn't have a bow and arrow with us? But it didn't seem like they were wised up at all to that as they kept on grazing, not paying much attention to us. The smaller one is just probably a yearling buck, and the other one is maybe about 2 or 3 years old. They casually graze on without even hardly giving us a glimpse. It's time to scratch a little itchy place, so. And boy, is it itchy, and does that feel good. They finally get tired of seeing us and graze their way up into the timber. Then we stop at Kindle Warm Springs. At one time, this place was used by hundreds of people. They'd come here and even wash their clothes in the warm waters of Kindle Hot Springs. And also, when they washed their clothes, they would use soap, and it was killing the little fish that lived in here. They're a little fish that was isolated from the rest of the world, so they evolved into their own individual type, so they're none like them any place.
Kendall Warm Springs dace. This is the only stream in the world where the dace, in a Latin name, is found. The fish developed into a distinct species when travertine deposits which formed the waterfall isolated them from the river. The largest fish grows to be 2 inches long. During the spawning, the male turns purple and the female light green. These tiny dace are rare and endangered. Please help us protect them by not polluting or degrading the quality of the water or shoreline. And it's Rhinixis or Ascalis thermalis. The last words.
After the days, we saw an osprey sitting on a limb in low limb on one of the quaking aspen trees as we moved toward the cabin. When we arrive at the cabin, we'll build a nice warm fire in the wood stoves and cook us some dinner and then retire for the night. By now, we have our antelope, have it all cut up, and we're going to head home. And Wally and Greta have already headed home. So we're going to go past the craters of the moon, and if it looks nice enough, we're going to camp the night at Craters of the Moon, since we've got our camping gear all dried out and it's quit raining, so we should have a good night at Craters of the Moon. And just a few hours later, we find ourselves at our favorite little campsite, right in between some jagged lava flows as the sun majestically dips down below the lava flows of Craters of the Moon National Park. The next morning, we're up early and we're going to take advantage of a photo op and take some pictures of Craters of the Moon National Park where the lava flows have flowed out and now it's starting to revegetate. Then we head for Whitehorse Hot Springs. We drop down in to the Owyhee Canyon, cross the Owyhee Canyon at Rome, and then we're soon will be at Whitehorse Hot Springs. Down the windy road into the Owyhee Canyon slowly as we move on. The snowless Steens Mountains stand guarding the desert as we move our way westward. The Steens Mountains usually have a little snow, but this year's been a super hot, super dry year, so there's not a trace of snow left up there. And then in the rain shadow of the Steens Mountains, we see Coyote Lake standing tall out in the background. That's where within a short while we have our tent set up. Then we look up and some friends of ours have shown. We had only time to walk up on the hill and get a few quick pictures of the beaver dam, which is trying to flood the place where the hot springs is and the campground where we camp, but it's still pretty right at the last light of day as the beavers are rushing around. The next morning, we're up early and decide to go out and see if we can find a few sunstones. Chuck and Stephanie had to go, so Kurt and Margaret and Marge and I go out and look for sunstones. We're finding quite a few. They're showing up pretty good today. One of our better days, and we're finding nice big ones too. Since they're showing up good, we're taking advantage of it and finding quite a few. The weather is growing warmer and warmer as that sun blasts down on us, baking us. So you just carry a little bag to put your sunstones in. Someone has made a claim on the sunstone area, and they've put a mailbox up on a tall pole with their claim papers in it. We go on from the sunstone area and chart a course for Coyote Lake. We're going out and check on Annette's property down the windy, rutted road to Annette's property, and then out on the Coyote Lake. We can open the throttle up and really travel on this, because it's a real smooth playa, which is made up of borax and salts and clays, and it's just a really nice place to try your vehicle out. We go humming across the playa at a decent speed. Then ahead of us are some rocks. And these rocks, on a lot of years, they're some of those rocks that travel. They are pushed by the wind and ice, and they leave a very distinct trail. The playa even shines as if it were water as we head back to the hot springs at a decent clip right as the sun is getting ready to set over Coyote Lake. We stop for a moment and look at Annette's Coyote Lake property up in the bunch grass and sagebrush. She has a teepee, and all we have to do is get the poles, and we'll be ready to put the teepee up, and that'll certainly be a nice place to camp. And the teepee will go really well with the beautiful surroundings of the Oregon desert and the Steens Mountains in the background. There's an old fence not far from Annette's property, made of split cedar posts. It looks like the posts are still okay, but the fence is basically fallen down. Within a short period of time, Margot has cooked us a very good dinner with a good salad and an antelope roast. So how could you beat that? And we've laid our sunstones out. We've washed them and laid them out. And so everyone is starved to death. And when you're hungry like that, I guess any food tastes better. Marge separates some of her sunstones as we all sit down, and it's time to start eating.
Oh,
Yeah.
the last piece. Oh, but look at the skillet.
Oh, we had leftovers.
We'll have that tomorrow. Yeah, that'll be good.
I put it
Yeah.
in the refrigerator.
Yeah, okay.
The moon is lighting the desert almost as if it's daylight by the time we get done with dinner. And then the next morning, I get up and take a look at the hot springs. The smaller pool is a hot one, and the larger pool is the cooler one. Kurt and Margot, this beaver pond is brand new, but those cattails waste no time at sending a chute skyward. And of course, then you build it and they'll come. And so the ducks and geese are coming in. During the night, we could hear the beaver slapping his tail on the water. That's their distress signal. So apparently something was after him. And then we could hear geese get up off the pond and circle around and then land again, only to be scared up again as the ducks feed. Then it's after our exceptional hot springs experience, it's time for the sunset. And so we'll get out and take a few pictures of the sunset. This hot springs, some geologists told me, is in the middle of an ancient big volcanic crater. It's almost in the middle of it, so we can see a circle of rocks around us. And by now, it's time to go up and see what the beaver are up to. And they're getting pretty active right now. They're dragging limbs. The beaver are busying themselves at stockpiling willow sticks for winter. And then it's time to head out. On the way out, we see a little group of wild horses out by Annette's place as they gallop away, eating up mile after mile of desert country.